am your host, Christine Marie, and I am excited tonight to dig into some topics, frankly, that are often overlooked, often ignored, often, frankly, dismissed as lesser of importance. And frankly, the very things that so often we poo-poo, that we view as ordinary, are the very fabric of our daily lives. They are the very like paintbrush, like the very paintbrushes. Oh, I love this. I just thought of this analogy. They are the actual paintbrush that is used, the tool which we use to paint and create the canvas of our lives. And so if we ignore the very tools that we're using, y'all, we end up getting to the end of our lives just wondering what in the heck happened. And so tonight I want to talk about some of those often overlooked aspects of our lives which are just core to the everyday. And even this morning, I was thinking, I've been kind of struggling. I actually was asked this question a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked me if I travel to escape. And it totally caught me off guard. It was one of my dear friends who asked this question, and I loved it. I mean, it was so pointed, it was so honest. And I've really been thinking about that a lot over the last couple of weeks, because my initial reaction, I did take a moment to think about it, because that warrants thought. And isn't that what I do? I love asking questions. And so if someone asks me a really thoughtful question, I need to honor it as I would hope that someone would honor mine. So I really thought about it in the moment. My response at the time was, when I initially went to France and Italy for about 6 to 8 weeks, that wasn't the intent. The intent was to finish my book. It evolved actually into doing some healing work from my former marriage that I thought I had already healed from, but there was layers deeper. And y'all, anytime we go away and we strip ourselves from the ordinary. So in one sense, tonight we're looking at the ordinary. We're looking at what are those commonplace elements in our lives that ultimately serve as the structure of life itself. But then also, when we move away from the ordinary and get into the unknown, those are the times, man, where we're exposed. We really, truly are. It's almost like we show up naked because we don't know what to expect. The certainty of that structure and of those frameworks are gone, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I actually want to read a quote, because this is partially what I use to respond to her. There's this quote that I read the first week I was in Paris, and actually my sister sent this to me. So I left in early April, and then I went to do a mastermind. I hosted a knowing retreat in Vegas, and then I ended up flying from, I believe it was Hollywood. I flew to Paris and was there for 2 weeks, and then was in Italy for 5 weeks. And so during that first week in Paris, I read this. My sister sent it to me. It was absolutely beautiful. It takes 4 to 6 weeks of uncomfortable isolation to rediscover who you are. Vision is formed alone. You cannot listen to friends. You cannot listen to family. You cannot listen to critics. What you're meant to do is seen only through your eyes. Other eyes will filter them to their dreams, to their desires, to their view of what's possible. Don't seek attention when you don't know yourself. Y'all, I'm going to read that again. Don't seek attention when you don't know yourself. That confusion is a gift. When you embrace it, everything changes. Your reality is a break. Your reality must break a few times before your path becomes clear. And so this whole conversation tonight that we're about to have, examining the structures of our lives that constitute the ordinary and thus life itself, also in tandem with when we kind of escape and get into that place of the unknown, the uncertainty, and the structure itself is stripped away, what's left? Who do we see? Who do we encounter when we look in the mirror? And in response to that question, that was initially my thought, and my reaction to her was, no, I'm not running away. It was very intentional why I went. Yet, y'all, as I'm living in the day-to-day, even today, I just posted on Facebook. I just had this experience at the DMV today. I went in and I brought my book, A Course in Miracles. And this book, God bless it, it's so long, and I am just reading through it. Every chance I get, I'm either reading that or Letting Go by David Hawkins or a few others. But I'm constantly kind of picking these books up and just resuming. And it's so rich that I feel like I'm devouring this book, but I'm only devouring like a page and a half or two, and then I walk away changed. So it's very dense. It's very, very good. So I pick up this book and I go to the DMV. And in so doing, I'm feeling kind of anxious. I'm looking at the time, just wondering how quickly time will go. I have my to-do list at home. And it was in that moment of allowing myself to let go of the numbers, the ticket numbers that they're calling out. I actually put in music on in my AirPods and put them on, and I just kind of drowned out where I was, and it was amazing. I ended up reading some really profound things from A Course in Miracles, and I actually wanted to read one of those tonight. What you believe is what you will teach. And she continues, as I have said before, as you teach, so shall you learn. If you react as if you are persecuted, you are teaching persecution. This is not a lesson a son of God should want to teach if he is to realize his own salvation. Rather, teach your own perfect immunity, which is the truth in you, and realize that it cannot be assailed. Do not try to protect yourself or your believing that it is assailable. Again, what you believe, you will teach. And so one of the best ways to analyze our beliefs, and when I say beliefs, I'm talking about what I referenced at the very beginning of this conversation, the actual tools in our lives that we use to paint the canvas of our lives. And so what are those beliefs? What are the tools that we're actually using to execute every single day? The ordinary moments, these times when we go into the DMV and we're sitting there rolling our eyes, huffing and puffing because it's taking so long, that behavior is rooted in a belief. And ultimately, my behavior is effectively teaching everyone around me what I believe and who I am. And I really want to break this down because this is so incredibly important. And the reality is, if we really understood this, we would live differently. We would proactively examine our life for tomorrow and say, okay, how do I want to change given this knowledge? If I really believed this concept, what I believe, I will then teach. And my teaching is by way of my behavior. So ultimately, our behavior is a reflection of our belief system. So what does it say about me when I wake up tomorrow morning and I hit snooze and I roll over and go back to bed? What does that say about how I value time? What does that say about how I value the day? What does that say about how I value even me and my participation in the world at large? Y'all, it's so simple and it's so small. And I'm talking about this example of waking up because I've done that the last 2 mornings. I really want to get back into my 4 a.m. wake ups. My 4 a.m. wake ups change my life. And I'm not talking metaphorically here. I'm talking truly. I look back and some of the most pivotal times in my life have come from and derived in this time, this sacred time every single morning where it's just me. And I wake up and the world is quiet and I go to the gym and I get there. I beat my friend at the gym. He's usually there at like 4:20 and if I can beat him, it's like a good day. But I haven't done that in so long. And if I can get to the gym at 4:10 and get my workout in, come back, shower, listen to my motivational talk while I shower, come in to my couch, get vertically aligned, and then I've got 2 to 3 hours to create or write or whatever it is during that time, that's mine. The rest of the day, it's so easy for it to be spoken for. So if I neglect my mornings, I'm effectively neglecting me. And so then this concept of what you believe, you will teach. And if we equate teaching with behavior, then my behavior is looking like it devalues fundamentally my participation in life because I'm not actually taking the time to nourish and cultivate and further develop who I am. Even today when I was sitting at the DMV, I was really I felt nourished. Like I was eating what my soul and spirit needed through this book, A Course in Miracles. And I realized I just was like, wow, all of us, we spend so much time honoring the intellectual nourishment. We go to masterminds, we go to networking events, we take courses, we learn new things all the time. We're constantly inputting to feed the intellect. And yet today, it felt like such a sacrifice to leave my laptop at home and feed and nourish and cultivate my soul and spirit. It actually felt, honestly, there was an element of it where it felt a little bit like a waste of time. It felt a little bit like what was it? Honestly, this is really important for me to note. It felt like I was abdicating responsibility. Like my responsibility is always to be working. And even as I say that now, that's so important. I've never really realized that I think that. Y'all, how many of us have these subconscious hierarchy of value systems that we don't even realize? This week, actually, at the Knowing Retreat, the Knowing Intensive, I was sitting with a founder, and I asked him, I was like, I want you to explain to me your value system. And we went through and we realized, he wants to cultivate a life that's wrapped around community, that's wrapped around his family, that's wrapped around people. But his days today look very different than the vision that he claims for his life. And so effectively, if his value system is currently predicated upon behaviors that are effectively unaligned with how he eventually wants to live, well, then when he changes his behaviors, but not his beliefs, he's going to be completely living unaligned while living in his vision and his future. So we have to be going back to the basics. We have to actually be scooting back from, okay, this is what my behaviors say. This is how I'm living my life. But what does that reflect about the core belief? Because if my value system that operates then the external, everything about me and how I show up in the world reflects a belief about myself, about those around me, about the hierarchy of values. And so effectively, if I'm not taking my value system into consideration to then analyze my beliefs and then analyze my behavior, I could effectively proclaim a desire for an outcome that I actually am not even ready to receive because my beliefs and my value system aren't aligned for that type of lifestyle. And so as we were talking about it, we were talking about all these different nuances of the life that he wants, yet at the core, he fundamentally is unprepared and ill-prepared to be able to walk in it and then receive it because his value system and belief system is so wrapped up in what he does. So if he says, I want to live a life where I'm not doing so much, well, that is predicated on the ability to value your being, your ability to just exist in the present moment, to be around people you love. You value emotional connection. You value and know that your value, the worth which you contribute to the world is predicated in your being, not your doing. But the way you're living right now, your modus operandi, and all of that reflects a belief system that is actually in complete opposition. It is the antithesis of your vision. And so, y'all, this is why we do the work, because we can be working so hard for something, get it, and then everything falls apart. We see this so often where it's the people reach the hundreds of millions of dollars, the $1 billion, the fame, the accolades, and then they arrive and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so empty. This is not what I thought it would be. And I really believe this because I've seen it so many times, and I've seen it for myself. When we finally get to that point, we weren't cultivating ourselves along the way to thus be ready to receive that for which we've worked so incredibly hard. And then the question becomes, well, how do I allow for my beliefs and my value system to evolve as my behaviors change, and thus life starts generating effectively the outcomes that I say that I want? And so this is where we need to analyze the correlation and connection between our beliefs and our behaviors. So at the very beginning of this conversation, I opened it and prefaced it with analyzing the structures that constitute our lives, the home in which we operate on a day-to-day basis, but then also, allowing for the simultaneous analysis of our lives by way of existing in kind of the unknown, getting out of, removing ourselves from that structure to then look back, and hindsight is 2020, and analyze the structure as well. So it's, okay, taking the time to consider the structure that constitutes our very lives, but then also removing ourselves out of it so that we can see it from an objective third party. It is so hard to do this analysis in the normal day-to-day unless we intentionally set aside the time, intentionally set aside the opportunity to exist outside of it and apart from it, to then turn around and say, okay, what does this life that I'm living say about who I am, what I believe, and the life that I want to build? Because if I'm living a particular life right now and I'm saying I want something so different, we're not being honest. And I experienced this with myself when I wrote my eulogy when I turned 30, 2 years ago. I wrote my eulogy about what everything I want everyone to say about me when I die. And then I effectively had to then look in the mirror and say, okay, well, am I actually living life now to prepare me to be that person at the end of my life? And sure, there's going to be aspects that will evolve and change along the way. Frankly, I wrote in my eulogy aspects about the type of wife that I want to be. I'm not a wife. And so we'll see how well I align with that. But even still, y'all, this is what is so beautiful about taking the time to do this analysis. And y'all, writing your eulogy is one of the fastest and quickest ways to go and do that assessment. My life right now against the vision tomorrow. Where is there disconnect? Where is there opposition between my behaviors and my stated beliefs? Where am I out of alignment? And so that was one of the biggest things that we really talked about this weekend within Knowing Founder Intensive was what are all of those areas of what you existing out of alignment looks like, but then what does looking and living in alignment look like? So we have to have the compare and contrast. If we're only ever looking towards the vision or only ever looking heads down in our day to day, we're not going to see the disparity. We're not going to be able to see the opportunities of bringing these two forces into alignment because it is so powerful when we wake up every morning and say, that's my vision, that's what I want, that's what I'm going for. Yet we're not doing so blindly. That's the beauty of being fully aware and having the reality check of this present moment. This is how I'm living my life in tandem with, and this is the goal. This is what I want. Doing the hard work. Sometimes it is putting our heads down, putting our blinders on. I love the analogy of horses with blinders. It keeps them focused. It's so beautiful marrying that with the vision, the ability to be so present here in this moment, plus the drive, being so committed to this future outcome, this future ideal for that which I'm striving. But then we have the ability to say, you know what? No, I'm going to be here in this moment with my kid who's 3 months old, lying here on the ground, who can give me nothing. Do we have the ability to dream so big, to be so incredibly driven, to go for it, and then also be present here? Because so many times, and I've worked with a number of founders, I was actually at an event teaching this very thing. I was teaching the Knowing Framework from stage, and then the gentleman hosting the event got on stage and shared this really moving story. I won't say who it was. He's actually since shared this since the event, but I'll protect him for right now. He gets on stage and he says, y'all, I was effectively living my entire life oriented towards this vision, towards this dream. I was doing it in the name of my family. And one night, my wife comes and I'm sitting up in bed. She's ready to go to bed and we haven't connected all day. And I'm sitting in bed working. It's 9:00 at night. And she sits down next to me very quiet and just looks over and she says, you saying that you're doing this for us is no longer true because we want you. You've done it. You've built it. Literally, congratulations. But now we want you. So from here on out, it's almost like the gunshot starts at this moment. Everything from here on out, you're no longer doing for us. And y'all, thank God he listened and he really changed his life. He changed the way that he showed up. But it took a hard stop, a hard examination of how he was living his day to day to then be able to say, okay, I've been saying I've been doing this for my family. It started out truly being for my family. But at some point, and this is where it's really important to actually go back and retroactively identify when was that some point, because so many of us, it's like, well, at some point, I started working out to be healthy. And at some point I got obsessed with how I looked, or I started out doing this business for my family. And at some point I got obsessed with the money. But what was that some point? Because otherwise, if we don't identify what happened, we'll end up doing a 360 and do it all over again, rather than a 180 linear progression of growth on our way to the vision for our lives. So if we're not taking those regular stops along the way to conduct this analysis, I love doing it for my birthday. Every July is my time to really sit and analyze my life. And frankly, I'm still kind of in that. At the end of July is my birthday. So in June, I look ahead and I'm like, shoot, my birthday's coming up. What have I done this year? And so I look at my life in 6-month and annual increments. And those are really the times that I get to sit and analyze, am I living in accordance with who I say I want to be, with the eulogy I've written? Are my behaviors aligned with my beliefs? And where is there a disconnect? And in that time span, I love being able to analyze and see, man, what's the one thing? Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote this book, What's the One Thing? And it's effectively identifying the lead domino in your life that if you were to knock it down, man, everything soars from there. The science behind that is literally, if you line up enough dominoes and you knock one over, it carries enough velocity to knock down the Eiffel Tower. Hence the example indicating the power of having one thing. And so every year from July to July, I want to be able to look back and say, okay, that's the one thing that I did. That's the one thing. And so that holds a very measurable, calculable return on the investment of my time in my year. But if I haven't taken the time to analyze that, to identify it, and then build out, obviously, the strategy to get there, but then also, am I actually really proud of how I've shown up in all the other categories of my life? So that one thing might be a business goal, but y'all, there needs to be intentionality for every single part of our life. And when I say every single part, it's the financial part. It's the physical wellness, health. How am I feeling? It's the emotional. How am I actually doing on that emotional level? What things are lying buried beneath me? Am I actually raging to my family and then I go out in public and everyone adores me and they have no idea how angry I get at home? What about the professional side? How much are other people guiding my calendar versus how much am I actually in charge of it? Am I actually pulling the strings and the levers of my own life in the professional sense? And then you continue that through, all the way through that question. Am I the one in control of my life? Am I the one pulling the levers of my life? That's the through line in every single category. And in so doing, man, do we get a real honest look, a hard look in the mirror. And man, I'm just going to completely deviate here because we can. I had this realization this morning. I was in my vertical alignment and I realized, boy, it blew my mind. I realized that as I've spent the majority of the last 3 or 4 years looking in the mirror to analyze the truth about myself, I realized this morning that I need to analyze other people closest to me. How are they feeding me? What does their input, each person is an input, right? And thus their input then informs my output. So what is the health about other people? What is the truth about everyone else in my life? Not just the truth about me, but what is the truth about them and their impact on me? And that even in saying this, I'm like, man, this is honestly, it's a terrifying thing. I don't really know how to do this yet. For the last 6 to 8 months, I've really been diving into how do I stay vertically aligned while engaging horizontally? And I've talked about this some on the Knowing Show, y'all. And so for those of you who followed, this concept is so hard. It's so hard because once we realize, oh, that person's toxic, let me just shut them out. That's not so easy when it's your partner, when it's your child, when it's your parent, when it's people that you genuinely love. What does it look like to maintain relationship while also contending, while also figuring out how to coexist together? There are no lessons in this, which is so mind-blowing. I was talking to my sister last night. Why is it that we spend 12 years of grade school cultivating the intellect and then the latter 5-10 years in getting our collegiate degrees and then masters and doctorates, but there's no training on how to exist in relationships? This is insane to me. When I really think about it, we're not trained how to parent, how to raise kids. It's like, good luck. It's terrifying. And so even this whole topic this morning that I realized in vertical alignment, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do relationship. In my marriage, I just closed my eyes and was like, I'll love you forever, and never acknowledged myself, never acknowledged anything he did wrong. And look at what happened. So clearly that's not the answer. But how do we exist in honest relationships where they can see the truth about me and I can see the truth about them? I remember very early on in my journey of knowing myself, where I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I want to have an honest relationship with you, and I don't know how. And God bless her. One time she even called me and she was like, are we okay? Like, are you angry at me? And I was like, no, I'm just being honest. I'm just actually speaking how I feel. And there's so many, this is why we just opened a whole kettle of worms. Y'all, it's not, speaking the truth is never justification for a lack of love, ever. There's no, like the whole saying goes, two wrongs don't make a right. There is no excuse for me to ever move out of vertical alignment. And so that is my highest and first calling, always, to maintain vertical alignment. Who do I want to be? What are my values? What are those guardrails guiding me as I live? And so as we think about, we're talking about the horse with blinders on, who's maintaining so much focus. We've got our future vision. We have the analysis of our normal day to day. Our blinders effectively are akin to those bumper rails in the bowling alley towards the vision. Our bumpers are our values. They are really what keep us on the straight and narrow. So who do I want to be in terms of how I maintain my character? What are the core beliefs that inform the manner in which I show up every single day? How do my behaviors, again, align with my beliefs? And how do my behaviors, what do those reflect about how I view myself, how I view the world around me, how I view God? So us really having clarity about kind of every one of those parts, our vision, our blinders, which are our beliefs and our values that keep us on the straight and narrow. And then our behaviors are effectively what the ramification and manifestation of that is. Our behaviors are only ever symptomatic of the core belief and the core value. So if we're behaving in a way that needs alteration and needs change, it's likely that we just need to trace the root all the way down to its genesis of, well, what's the value there? What's the core belief that's out of alignment that needs to come back? So then as we extend vertically and as we extend horizontally and going outward in relationship with other people, this whole talk around self-love over the last couple of years has really done so much damage. I see more and more people shutting themselves off, cutting off people, and isolation and loneliness is just skyrocketing. That is an epidemic in and of itself. And so as we lack the ability, we were talking about tools at the very, very beginning of this. Our beliefs are the tools with which we then go and engage with life, whether we want to use the analogy of the tool itself as the paint brush with which we stroke and paint the canvas of our lives, whether it's the tools of the house and structure that we're building in which we then go and exist. Our beliefs are so incredibly important. And so with these new beliefs, we see them on social media all the time about having boundaries, get those toxic people out of our lives, self-love. It's not an actual, it's a mantra and it's a belief, but not an actual intelligence. So this is, oh man, this is so fun. The intelligences, spiritual intelligence, physical intelligence, emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence. Each one of these. So I grew up very spiritually informed, you could say. I was taught the ABCs, literally. I was taught literally alphabetically a Bible verse for every single letter of the alphabet. It was cute. And so I was trained how to think, but not why to think why to think whatever the verse was, let's say. There was no root. There was no actual intelligence backing up and serving as the foundation from which the soil really is fertilized and the sun comes in and we really allow for the cultivation of these seeds that are sown. But if it's without an intelligent design and without an intelligent why behind it, we end up having all these beliefs that are not rooted and grounded in anything firm and can thus be easily pulled out. So when we think about these concepts of like self-love, well, why? What is the purpose of self-love? What is the purpose of taking care of oneself? What is the purpose of knowing oneself? I really sat with that when I was in Paris because I was like, okay, so we know ourselves, but then what? And I really sat with that. And then I just realized, I was like, oh man, the reason why authenticity matters so much, the reason why we know ourselves, the reason why we take care of ourselves is for the purpose of love. Vertical alignment is only ever as meaningful as it spills over and impacts the horizontal. Otherwise, we end up being so self-focused. Self-love turns into narcissism, and then caring for others apart from a grounded, rooted vertical turns into codependence. Horizontal and vertical alignment in isolation are both incredibly dangerous and incredibly damaging. They need to come and work in concert together. From the overflow of vertical alignment is the outpouring and the manifestation of the horizontal manner in which we engage with the world. And so if we have a strong vertical, that is a great place to start. But it requires us living with our eyes open, fully awake and fully aware to the state of our own selves, knowing the truth, looking in the mirror. But then, in order for us to maintain that same type of health and approach in the horizontal, we need to look with eyes wide open to those around us and be able to see the truth, to be able to confront it. So this question of what are the beliefs that are informing the behaviors? Because effectively, we're going to end up teaching that by way of just our example. We need to analyze that on the vertical scale and the horizontal scale. So Amy, Qasim, I'm so glad you all joined tonight on Facebook. Thank you, my friends. I think that